Good afternoon, class. I'm Jared Thomas, and today I wanted to talk to you about a topic that would really enrich an American History 2 course. A lot of times, students get into American History 2, and in the beginning, they're talking about the after effects of Reconstruction, the Gilded Age of America, and they kind of get launched into imperialism and then on into the early 1900s and the trust busting and then falling into the Great War. And they kind of get lost in the sweeping tide of America changing from the 19th century into the 20th century. And I think that one of the most important topics that gets lost in that transition has to do with an event that happened in my beloved state of Texas. So I found some articles that would be fantastic for enriching the course and expanding the knowledge of the students just a little bit, and would provide for some excellent discussion board topics, a little bit of outside of class projects, which could promote digital literacy, but overall would be great for the pedagogy of any American History 2 class to encourage the students to look outside of the box that they're typically used to looking in. So, to introduce the topic, the Spindletop Gusher, 1901, January the 10th, down near Beaumont, Texas. A gentleman by the name of Patillo Higgins and Anthony Lucas had been working for a few months, attempting to drill an oil well that everyone basically said was foolish to pursue. But on that day, as oil gushed up through the earth, spewing 100 feet into the air, they changed the world. And I think this is a topic that's often lost on the importance of an American History 2 class, because so many different things happen after this event that really launch not only the United States, but the entire world into the modern era. Before the Lucas Gusher, oil had been present in America, largely in the area of Pennsylvania, but the world had never seen anything like the Lucas Gusher before. And with that volume of oil, reports have indicated that it was spewing 25,000 to 100,000 barrels of oil in a day. Now, what's really interesting about this, and I think this would add to the course as well, is the major newspapers of the day didn't really pick the story up right away. In fact, the stories were largely just ran in Texas in the beginning. The Houston Daily Post, their January 11th newspaper, didn't even have a story on the main page. That's how unimportant people thought this was at the time. The article didn't appear until page 3 of the newspaper, under the title "Oil Struck Near Beaumont, a Stream of Petroleum Shot into the Air for 100 Feet." And then it gives a short article kind of about what was going on over there. We don't see some really major national news until several days later. In the New York Times, for example, they have an article that was released on January 30th. And these series of articles I'm going to discuss now would really do a lot as far as showing how big of an issue oil was, other than becoming a new resource that we could take and refine and use in a variety of ways. But it also shows some of the other issues that got brought up because of oil. So, for example, the New York Times January 30th article says Texas may claim oil well. Lucas Gusher at Beaumont may be found a school on school land formerly belonging to the school fund. So this article basically explores the idea that in Texas, back in 1883, they passed a law called the Public Free School Land Act, which said that they were going to designate land to be set aside for public schools, and that any oils or minerals that were found on that land would be the property of the state. Problem was that land had been sold since then. So the argument was, well, does the state still have claim to the oil, or do the new owners, in fact, own the rights to the oil? So that was debated a little bit. It was eventually decided the owners had the right, not the state. But it does bring up some awesome issues for discussion, such as state rights, legal issues, and property rights as well. Another really cool article that was discussed from the New York Times also showed up on April the 7th, 1901, which goes great with another article I'll mention in just a second. It said the Texas oil boom, Secretary of State's office flooded with company charters. So this is kind of the modern gold rush, from California's 1849, rush when everyone flooded into California hoping to get rich. People did the same thing to the Beaumont area in Texas. People flooded into the state hoping that they could get rich off of oil. So this kind of ties in something that students would have some previous knowledge of to let them kind of get the idea of how important this was and the draw that it had on the American people at the time. But what's really cool is it goes along with an article just a few days later that shows up in the Times. It says, Texas oil boom combined to compete with the trust may be formed this week, a new $2 million company. So when you read the article, it talks about how several of the small little oil companies in the Beaumont area became absolutely panicked when Standard Oil came in April and began to buy up property in Port Arthur. They were buying up waterfront, they were buying up wharves, that's the word, sorry, and they were also buying up a lot of the port facilities. So these companies became nervous that once Standard Oil got in there, that they were going to take over and all these guys were going to lose out. So they formed together to create a company called the Beaumont Confederated Oil and Pipeline Company, just so they could compete with Standard Oil and hold on to some of that money that they'd invested and were hoping to make. Now, the biggest reason this would have a huge impact in an American History 2 course and be absolutely vital for the students to understand, like I said earlier, is this changed the world. In an article written by Boyce House in 1946, simply titled Spindletop, he discusses the idea that Spindletop was a time period change in the history of the world where we move away from a heavy reliance on coal energy. It's a time when electricity is becoming a big deal, and now we have a brand new fuel source that not only could provide fuel for the country, but would eventually go on to provide the basis of a whole plethora of products that are used in the world today. And he made this statement. He said that Spindletop and its consequences transformed Beaumont from a town of 10,000 persons to a throbbing city, changed Port Arthur from a village in a marsh to the world's greatest refining center. So there's a little bit of the American impact and the world impact in that statement. Also, he says, it gave much of the impetus that has made Houston the metropolis of the Southwest and one of the greatest ports on earth. So we know today that Houston is a major international shipping port, not just for the United States and the Northern Hemisphere, not the Northern Hemisphere, sorry, the Western Hemisphere, but also to countries around the world that do business in and out of Houston and rely on the goods that are brought in and out of Houston. He also goes on to say that it was the training grounds for the leaders of the petroleum industry of the nation for the following 40 years after its discovery. So that's an important reason to study Spindletop as well. And it also states that it lifted Texas from a negligible position in oil to the foremost rank among the 48 states. So this article really helps us to see that Spindletop would be an essential topic for an American History 2 course to help students understand why America changed from the low technology, kind of industrial age, almost starting to peter out into a brand new industrial boom thanks to the discovery of oil. And what's kind of interesting too is a lot of times after Spindletop, I know in Texas history, we don't really follow up with what happens after that. But what I found interesting in another article, this one written by E. DeGloyer, focused on Anthony Lucas, the man who drilled the well, and kind of his story. And it goes on to say that when he discovered the oil at Spindletop, he becomes an international sensation because he was the genius behind how they were going to drill and the technique that they used to actually drill down 1,139 feet to discover the oil. So he becomes an engineering consultant who not only travels across the United States teaching other people how to drill for oil, but he also travels to foreign countries. Mexico was one of his biggest, most important impacts that he had, but he also traveled to Russia, Romania, and other countries as well. So this is another example of how Spindletop really set the stage for the world to be forever changed, and the men who were involved in this became important figures as others hoped to learn what they could from them as well. I believe that these headlines, these articles will be fantastic, like I said, to create discussion points, to get students into researching how this event changed technology, what types of businesses were created, what happened with the trust busting that would have come after this, and the different companies that would have been impacted by this transition into oil. So there's just a whole massive array of topics that could interest students and could really create for some fantastic classroom topics to be brought up by the students as well. So thank you guys for listening. I hope you were able to enjoy this, and I hope you guys have a wonderful Thanksgiving.